I'm the director here at the Button Units Museum, and I want to thank all of you for coming out to see Dr. O'Malley speak this evening. We acknowledge and honor the Abenaki, Pennacook, Wabanaki peoples past and present, upon whose traditional lands and waterways the Button Woods Museum is located. Tonight, our speaker, Dr. O'Malley, is going to give you a brief history of the Irish in Haverhill. This is part of our revitalized Buttonwoods project that we are in our third year of implementation, and the goal of it is to make sure that we're including all the members of our community, that we're talking about all of the voices of our community members, and our Irish immigrant history is but one part of that. I'm going to let Dr. O'Malley introduce herself with all of her accolades, so welcome. Thank you.
Put it on, please. My What did you do to it? I don't know.
Test.
There you go. Thank you very much. I am Pat O'Malley, Bradford, born and bred, educated in April. Trained in history at Merrimack College, Georgetown University, and Boston College. And somewhere along the line, I managed to get married with 3 children. I'm assisted at the moment by my youngest daughter, Patsy, because in the past few years, macular degeneration has done a job in my eyes. And having typed up my notes, I can't read them. But at least I'm able to type them. So you are going to see the experiences of a trained professor as she talks off the top of her head. So that's whatever time it takes me. I have many connections with the Haverhill Historical Society, by the way. After I earned my doctorate, I began to serve as the executive director of the Bay State Historical League, which is a league of historical societies, historical houses, big museums, little museums, whatever. And Haverhill Historical was one of the members, and we made a number of meetings here at the Historical Society, and I remember working on a couple of grants for the society. I was a member of the board of directors here for a number of years. Now I have to sing along with it. But I think my closest tie was with my students. And for many, many years, I would integrate time at historical at the Buttonwoods with classes I was teaching either on local history, New England history, or a delightful course called Material Culture, where I inspired students to learn about the world around them by looking at the physical artifacts like architecture, gravestones, a variety of things that help you to decide how to live. In other words, the some thing that any good historical museum tries to do, particularly one that has Buttonwoods that's at the historic houses like the John Woodhouse. Okay, so that's my background and what's all. So I'm going to talk about the Irish. Nice to include the Irish, but I think we ought to start it up by saying, the first significant ethnic group to come to the Haverhill, start with that. Give or take the Yankees who had only been here for a few hundred years. Haverhill is a slightly different situation from one of the other Massachusetts big cities because it was a New England colonial town and therefore was long established for any immigrants to come in. Lawrence, Lowell, even to an extent even Boston, Lawrence and Lowell particularly were created cities. And therefore it starts off almost with a totally immigrant base. So Haverhill's going to be different, and the reaction to the immigrants is going to be different as well. Let's start off from the 1830s, long before the famous famine. And for the first time, we see a reference to hate to Irishmen in any kind of written document. And that would be in the very famous diary written by Giles Merrill up in the North Parish. Are you familiar with that? It's about 50 years worth of diary entries. It's been transcribed, and I wish to God somebody would publish it. It's been sitting at the Haverhill Public Library office. But for every single day for almost 55 years, Mr. Merrill, a little man who was also a shoemaker, sat in his little house up at the 125, just where Main Street turns to go to Westhill. So it's right there. I'm sure you've all been up there many times yourself. Mr. Merrill writes in 1838 that they agreed to extend the railroad from downtown here, and it's going to be coming up near us soon. A few months later, the plans for the railroad have now worked, and some 40 cars of Irishmen, cars being, I suppose, wagons, have arrived. And they're going to be doing the digging, doing the laying of the road, etc. This is a railroad, this is the railroad line that we're going from the downtown Haverhill depot up along the little river, making a bend up where Route 125 bends into Glasgow, and then eventually work its way through Exeter, Durham, and then on to Portland, Maine. So 1838 is when it has made its way finally, the roads being built up from Boston, and it makes it to Haverhill. Merrill makes comments about the Irish. At one point he talks about all the noise that's coming from the camp they have. So clearly the camping, how did they do the building? Because there being, and he puts some capital as very packed, periodic. Packed. Then a bit later it talks about there's been a death in the Irish camp. A 9-year-old child has died. It's an aunt. They're traveling with their families. Whoever these railroad builders are, they're traveling as family groups. And a Catholic priest from Lowell has come to conduct a funeral service and to bring the body back to Lowell. So it's an aunt. Some of the first Irish to arrive at Haverhill are going to be coming as part of these railroad workers coming from, had already been living in Lowell for a while, and helped to build that city back in the 1820s. And now, 1830s, they're working their way to the railroad, and in another few years, if they continue to work with the railroad, they'll probably be helping to build the city of Lawrence. Those first people, as I said, are the first indication we have. And what I will do for the talk is periodically throw in a little mini biography of somebody who fits into this time period. And for this time period, I'm going to start off with a character, and that's our way of describing a character, known as Captain Nicholas Costello, a man from County Kilkenny in Ireland, Little Ireland, who evidently earned the title of captain by being a member of a fishing boat. Made his way eventually to Boston. We started working on the railroad lines, worked on the line to Lowell, on which we were talking about, and then on the line to Haverhill, where he stopped, took off, settled down into Haverhill, kept on working for the railroad as a watchman over at where the crossing was, as the tracks came across the bridge into Railroad Square. It was at ground level up until 1911. So you needed a watchman there. Keep an eye on things. Nicholas Costello became rather famous because of a prank that was pulled. In the 1884 election, Benjamin Cleveland. No.
Oh, presidential.
Come on. That was the first Democrat to be elected president since the 1850s. Should be able to remember his name. Arthur Cleveland. Who's Cleveland? President Cleveland becomes elected. And a picture is taken of Mr. Costello, completely top hat, carrying claiming that is then sent to the president. And the president responds to it, the newly elected president, by sending a letter of congratulations, because supposedly Mr. Costello was 106 years old and he had gone out to vote for this president. Wasn't even wonderful. Well, Mr. Costello got to be 106 very quickly because in the 1870 election, 1870 census, he was listed as being about 60 years old. So between 1860 and 1884, he suddenly aged a great deal. That's what living in Haverhill probably is, right? All right. 1850, I mean, I'm an historian. Historians need to have something to build a case on. You need proof, you need verification. So I started off my research ages ago, looking at everything I could find. Looking at back editions of the old newspapers, trying to find any reference at all to no Irish need apply. I kept hearing about that all my life. Couldn't find anything on the papers. And then going through every publication there was that would give lists of names. The very famous birth, marriages, and deaths volumes that the Essex Institute did for every single town in Essex County. They found exactly one Irish couple, and that was a marriage in 1849. Nothing else, not a single other Irish person was mentioned as being, because they wouldn't be to be born, they would be born able Indian Irishman, but no deaths, no other marriages. Okay, the first time I can start to find any good information is 1850 census, which also happens to be the first one to list the place of origin, where a person comes from. According to the 1850 census, Haverhill had about 5,800 people. Of that number, some 344 were foreign born. Okay? My assumption was that there were going to be half and half French, Canadian, and Irish. Of that 354 foreign born in Haverhill in 1850, more than 270 were Irish. So a tiny handful of French and a lot of Irish, but no one showing up yet in the records. The other thing that 1850 census showed was that 2 people born in Ireland owned property out of all those Irishmen. Only 2 owned property in Haverhill. One was a young man named Thomas Bolan, B-O-L-A-N, not the usual familiar with the deed. And the other was his uncle, Valentine Gadsby, almost like the great Gatsby, but spelled with a D instead. They had houses side by side on Hilldale Avenue, or what, if you'll pardon me, was the new Jew Street. Well, because one Jewish person was passed by it. Somewhere near Little River, right at the very beginning of Hillfield Street, Hillfield Avenue. A tiny little house. There are pictures of it in the family. 2 rooms side by side, probably with a lot to look from, that was it. And the houses were side by side. Only Irishmen owned property in 1850, the 250. This Thomas Bolan and his wife Peggy happened to be the people who were married in Haverhill in 1849, first Irish marriage. Okay. We'll follow the Bolans as we go through the next few decades, just to give you a sense of the change. 1850 is also the year in which Boston Diocese decides to establish a Catholic parish in Haverhill. The assumption was there were enough Irish there, or enough Irish and French Catholics who warrant having a church. A priest by the name of John McDonald, a Dominican priest, and that's a religious order, from Galway County Galway, was sent to be able to get a church built, get a parish established, and try to make sure that these foreign Irish Catholics would be able to survive with their Yankee Protestant neighbors who were going to be the dominant population in the city. MacDonald was an unusual person by that time. He had been educated in Rome, very well educated evidently. He was also a diplomat of the highest order because he got along extremely well with all the important people in town. He wasn't just catering to his own Irish people. To the point where when it came time to collect money for the new church, he was able to get a personal mortgage from Dr. Rufus Longley, a physician, whose house just happened to be in what was then called Sargent Square, we know as Lafayette Square, right at the junction of Broadway and Gilldale Avenue, right about where these new Irish Catholics were obtaining the houses. Now, the church is going to cost some $8,500. Mr. Longley, Dr. Longley, provided a mortgage of close to $2,000, which was a big chunk of money. That combined with what Father MacDonald had received, I imagine, from the Bishop of Boston, and the individual contributions of his parishioners, provided that money at the church built before the year was out. There's a little church on Harrison Street, which is just off of Winter Street, and about a block or two up from the Little River. In fact, it was almost directly behind the Stevens Mill, which I think was a big draw for many immigrants, particularly Irish, to settle in that part of the city. Those streets up and down Winter Street, just from the Little River up, and toward Primrose, but nowhere near Primrose Street at that point. And on the other side, on Gilldale Avenue, and all along the bank of the Little River, which in the 1850s, until the late 19th century, flowed open all the way through the middle of downtown Haverhill. So what is now Post Office Square was just a wide open river with all the problems of smells and flooding and everything else that comes from the river. It was along that strip, what's now then became factory buildings very quickly, woodlands, little houses for poor people, but in this case, immigrants. Where a cluster of immigrants was living. The 1850 census also showed me something else. I had just always assumed the Irish lived in what was known as the acre. Never could be defined by anyone I knew who lived in the acre, because it always seemed to be wherever they lived. Wherever that person lived, that was the part of the acre. What was known as the acre, God's little acre, it seems to have been the territory around the church. That area between Primrose Street and the river. Very small houses, even to this day. So that, and of course, but that wasn't what surprised me when I looked at the census, because I was finding Irishmen all throughout the city, and far more out in the country than I ever would have expected. They were all through Ayers Village. They were all over the area of Canosa, by the Canosa Lake. They were safely across the river of Bradford. They were as far out as Vaudeville, which in those days was just nothing but half a dozen farms and nothing else. They were way out in Salem Street. And then, of course, I thought to myself, remembering my own trip back to where my grandfather and grandmother came from, County Cork. Most of these people had been farmers anyway, or at least they had lived on farm land. They were used to haying, they were used to digging, they were used to planting things. They were used to dealing with chickens and cows and horses. They were more than welcome as workers on a farm. And particularly, let's say an older couple, maybe one which didn't have children, maybe one whose children have grown and moved away, ideal workers to come and fill in. Now, the same was true of something else that's going to be different about the Irish. Women traveled independently. Unlike most of the other later ethnic groups, women were allowed to travel with each other to come to the new country. Sometimes it might be sisters coming into an area where their brothers already were. Sometimes it might be girls traveling with their families. But from the very beginning, there are going to be independent young women. And many of the farmhouses were ideal for them. Places where they could use an extra pair of hands. Women who could used to doing the hard work of the laundry, dealing with the chickens, whatever, doing the rough cleaning, whatever. And as my daughter reminded me, learning a few of the things about living in a cottage with just a single fireplace to do your cooking over, as was true of the cottages in Ireland that we ran into. All right, so quite a different pattern from what I'd expected. I'm going to give you a couple of other biographies of some early people to give you all right? I'm going to look at how varied they are going to be. I mentioned Thomas and Peggy Bolden. They'll start to produce a family in their little house on Hilldale Avenue. But when the Civil War broke out, Thomas went and volunteered for the U.S. Navy. Even though he was in his mid-30s, he had about 6 children at the time. He served the entire time of the war, came back home, went to work at the shoe factory. His oldest son became a policeman. His youngest son started a band and was a prime entertainer. Every place began to be late, all the different parties, the different dances that would go on. So there's a classic Irish family. A policeman and an entertainer, but more than one. So that was the Bolden, an ordinary family. Husband and wife were married well for 50 years. He died somewhere near the end of the century, and she died soon after, into the 20th century. Family still continues in the city. Second family is quite different. It's the Roach family. Roach family came from Glenville in County Kerry. Father and mother and 3 grown sons and a grown daughter arrived in the 1850s. Oldest son, John Martin, started a grocery. Over and over again, I am finding Irishmen starting a grocery. And before you begin to think in terms of market basket, we're talking about the front room of your house being turned into a place you can sell some potatoes, some bread, something. As you drive throughout, you will look around for some of these little remnants of the tiny stores that still showing. You can still see that room in the bottom of our house with a big plate window in the front and a bit of an awning over the top. Probably a market that was still in use until 20 years ago. So the old son becomes a grocer. In the 1870s, Haverhill became a city in 1870, established a government with a mayor and a city council. 3 years after the city was incorporated, John Martin Roach was on the city council. Irish born and already a member of the city government. 10 years later, his nephew will also be a city council. And that's the beginning of all the Irishmen that keep coming on the city council. There will not be an Irish-American mayor, however, until about the time of World War II, when Albert Glynn becomes mayor. But as we used to say in our family, he was a Republican. So we weren't quite sure if that counted. He was definitely an Irish Catholic. Shoe manufacturer. All right. John Martin Roach has a number of children. His oldest daughter graduated from Haverhill High School the same year that John went on the city council, 1873. The following September, she became the first Irish Catholic girl to not only graduate from high school, but to become a school teacher. As will two more of her sisters, and as will a stream of Irish Catholic, Irish American girls going to Haverhill High School and going right into elementary school teaching. No normal school or nothing, it was straight into teaching. John Martin's more significant child, I think, well, that's probably not fair to say, we have few school teachers. But his only son, John Martin Jr., is fascinating. Again, Haverhill High School graduate. And then from what I've learned in biographies, he studied under some professors at MIT, whatever that meant. We figure that, and the way it was phrased, they're trying to say he didn't go to MIT, but found to study it. He became a builder in Haverhill. And among the many things he would create were the following schools. If you know Haverhill, and you like studying architectural styles, this is a good way to look at succession of styles. Study in Ward 5, Artlet School up in Mount Washington, Moody School down off of River Street, into Bradford, the Wood School, into Haverhill, the Highlands, the Fox School, and then further up, Walnut Square School. Okay? 5 schools. And then, most importantly, he got the contract to build what was then called the new Haverhill High School on Summer Street, which is now City Hall. Major, 1908, which also was the same year, he was building Sacred Hearts Church in Bradford. So it's not just certain schools. A little bit later on, he'll do St. Michael's Church up on High Street. And he built the Colonial Theater, for those of you old enough to remember the old Colonial Theater on Merrimack Street, which was not just a movie theater, it was a full production theater with an orchestra pit, full backstage, and everything else. The Water Street Fire Station, and at least 2 pumping stations that connected with him. So, not bad for a guy with just high school education. And they're beautiful buildings, beautiful buildings. All of them, most of them will survive. So that's one thing. Unfortunately, John Martin Jr. or his 3 sisters got married. So there's no 3rd generation in that. But his brother, Michael Roach, the oldest brother, Michael Roach, the second of the sons to come over, again had a number of children. One of whom would become a Marine, and when he finally died, I think in the 1950s, he was the oldest U.S. Marine around. More importantly, one of Michael's sons is the nephew that became city councilor, but is the line from his children who, Michael's son, who started out working in the shoe shop and eventually owned the shoe shop. Started out just a minority, something like person. That was a major thing. Died young. Thank you. Died young before his sons had grown up. I went to school with the grandsons of that man. But again, so people starting out with almost nothing, going that far, so, all right. Roughly, another person I want to mention from the 1850s group, a 3rd mini biography. His name is John Croston. John Croston, as far as we can tell, is the first doctor in here. With the Irish lineage. His father and 2 uncles came to Bradford from a part of the county court called Bantry Bay, which is in the western part of Cork, a beautiful place, close to where my people came from. They settled in Bradford, way out on the outer edges of Salem Street, where the three brothers became either farmers or stone cutters. I mean, the men who were cutting stone for cemeteries, etc. So, those three brothers. The eldest of three boys had a son named John. That went to medical school, went to Haverhill, went to Bradford High School. Little tiny Bradford High School. Went to Bradford High School, and from there went to Dartmouth College for a year. From Dartmouth went to New York University, NYU, where he graduated magna cum laude. Came back to Haverhill. At 25 years old, he done all that by 25, started his practice, and was the longest serving doctor in Haverhill. He was the chief surgeon at the hospital for a long time, beloved. Not, I believe, Catholic. I can't find any connection. But if any of you went to Haverhill High School, you may be aware of the fact there's an annual prize given out on graduation for the person who has done the best reading of a poem, named the Elaine Crosser Prize. Elaine Crosser was the daughter of this Dr. George, and was a longtime teacher of English at Haverhill High School. Okay. 1860s, Haverhill's population has grown to 10,000. Went from 5,800 in 1850, 1860 it's gone up to 10,000. Of that number, 1,200 are immigrants. No, that 1,200, 1,000 are Irish born. And when you figure the population is 10,000, the 1,000 Irish just includes those born in Ireland. Add to that their children, and you're talking about maybe 15% of the population is already immigrant. And that's not including the French just yet. Okay? I talked about our friend Thomas Boland, who went and served in the Navy. Two other interesting examples from the Civil War period, and then I'll just do some summaries, some general ideas. One is a man named Dennis Ford. His family lived around near the church on Haverhill Street. He went to the Navy, the Army rather. What makes Dennis Ford stand out is he wrote letters home. And the family saved the letters. The letters from Dennis Ford to his wife have all been transcribed, and again, they're sitting waiting for someone to please get them published. They're marvelous letters. He writes to his wife, both from the battlefield and from the prison. He served in 2 prison camps down south. He was in the army or in prison throughout the entire war, and was writing through that entire time. The letters are simple, but he's talking about what's going on around him. He served in the famous 28th Regiment, I think it was, the All-Irish Regiment from Massachusetts. It's clear from the way he writes his letters that the letters are being sent to the local priest, Father McDonald, who then reads the letter to the wife and then writes the answers back to him. So there's regular correspondence, which makes me figure that that's the way a lot of writing must have been done. That's how the writing to Ireland was done. I know in many cases, it was the local priest here who would write the letter home for you to your folks back home, who would then get the message that how things were, or here's the money I'm sending you, etc. All right, completely different kind of family. Where the I'm just telling people the blank. explain it. Thank you. That's why you're a gift answer. Yes. There was a different kind of family. It was Plain, S-P-L-A-I-N-E. The family come from east of Cork City. And from the writing I had seen, it said they were gentry, which means they were property owners. So probably not Catholics, because no Catholic in Ireland could own property in the 18th and 19th century. You could rent it, even if it had been in your family for 1,000 years. You could rent it from the landlord who had given it by the English crown, but you could not own it. So these were gentry people. So, and in the one biography that I found, it mentions that their mother was the sister to the famous Irish sculptor John O'Mahony, or O'Mahony, we would say. My son tried to look him up on Google, couldn't find any famous Irish sculptor named John O'Mahony. Could find an Irish rebel named John O'Mahony, but it doesn't seem to fit the person we're talking about. But whatever, Splains had money, they were well educated. There were 5 grown sons in the family that came over in the 1860s. Every one of them joined this 28th Regiment. They all became officers. And the oldest son, Colonel Henry, became the head of the regiment. So a distinction. The family does not seem to have stayed long in Haverhill, although I did know some descendants of one or two of them. Well, at least they were here for one. Okay. By 1870, things have changed. In the 1870s, there are going to be enough French Canadians so they can build their own church. The first Italian families have arrived, the Gaidellas, and then later the Carbonis from the Genoa area of Italy, and they will be followed very quickly by a lot of relatives and neighbors. And then by the 1880s, when famine hit southern Italy, suddenly there'll be a mass of southern Italians coming into the area. Never had any German immigrants as St. Lawrence will have. We will have a number of Armenian and Greek immigrants, but we never had any Lebanese or Syrian as Lawrence will have. So a smaller number of variety of immigrants, which probably explains why Italians, Irish, and French have been the dominant ethnic groups until the late 20th century. Numerous Greeks suddenly became mayor of the city. Greeks can have more of an influence. Okay. Some general comments about the Irish. We find them being grocers. We find them involved in some industries. One of the things that a few of the grocers did was become emigration agents. The people who would buy the tickets and send them home to their family. We find them working as hatters, H-A-T-T-E-R-S. There are many hatters all throughout Haverhill, long before the shoe shops started. A lot of laborers. When my grandfather first came to the city of Haverhill in 1885, the first job he got was with the city, helping to build an ice house up at Round Pond. And he went from there to help him to build the big hotel in Ward Hill before he ended up cleaning railroad cars for the railroad. And yet, with all that background, before he was here for 5 years, he'd already bought his own second-home house in Bradford, and starting us on our rise to becoming uppity Irish Americans, educated Irish Americans. Just general statements. Irish are becoming policemen very soon after the Civil War, but you never find them on the fire department. When the utilities companies start, we find them in the gas company very quickly, but never in the electric company. who find Irishmen, as I said, making the impact in politics. I told you about the city councilors. There will be an Irish American state representative by the 1890s, the famous Weeping Jim Carey, a socialist. But again, as I said, no mayor until the 1930s. That's me. Oh, my son. Say hello, Terry. He's been taking notes for me the last month, so he knows most of what I'm saying. I just want to post you on a lot of first. Let me just give you a couple more names, just to give you significance. So a man named John Wynn, W-I-N-N. His family came from the northern county of Vermont, with the McGuire family also. If you know any McGuire is a neighbor. John Wynn goes to Haverhill High School and goes on to Holy Cross. Goes on to Holy Cross, which would have been the only Catholic college we could afford. Boston College was just a day off school in those days. Out to Holy Cross, from Holy Cross to Boston University Law School, where he graduates summa cum laude. Comes back to Haverhill, establishes a law practice. By the end of the century, he is a judge. So he's the first Irish-American judge, the first of many. He'll be joined very quickly by John J. Ryan I and Dan Allen, all starting a pattern. Second person that I wanted to mention, I'm blanking again. What's the other name? It was very important. So when I try to probably try to just do things off the top of my head. Okay, well, Hugh Donahue was probably the second Irish Catholic doctor. But from an interesting family, again, graduates from Haverhill High School, goes to work in the shoe shops for a couple of years to earn some money, and then goes off to medical school. I think it's Harvard Medical School. Comes back to Haverhill to become the first Irish-American born in Haverhill, as opposed to John Croston in Bradford. They will be the doctors for the Irish in Haverhill. I remember my mother talking about them over and over and over again. Dr. Donahue had one brother who was very involved in politics, was the man whose name I kept finding over and over again when I looked at applications for citizenship. He would be the person acting as a witness. So the person who would train immigrants as to how to apply and then take them to the Senate to sign up. Another brother started a fish business, which was around for a very long time, well into the mid-20th century, the Donahue Brothers Fish Market. And more importantly, the Donahue Brothers Liquor Center. Okay? So, what more important industries can you possibly get into? You can get into politics, liquor, and fish. You'll notice that aside from that, I've said almost nothing but liquor. And there is this classic, Irish drunkenness, etc. You've got a mixed book here in here. And I say this way because quite clearly there were a number of saloons in here. Quite clearly with Irish names on them. Quite clearly there were a number of very significant liquor dealers with Irish names. And yet, the first priest, Father McDonald, also started the first total abstinence society. One of the Father Matthews. This Father Matthews was an Irish priest who, concerned with Irish drinking problems, and it started a total abstinence. Never mind slowing down your drinking, stop drinking completely. Idea of taking the pledge. So Father McDonald had started the Father McDonald Total Abstinence Society in Haverhill. Okay. Father McDonald will be transferred after 20 years. Usually, a new priest like that would stay 2 years, like, but he is transferred about 1870, and the story that's not quite people don't quite come out and say this, but it does show up in a lot of ways in some of the records, suggests that he was asked to leave by the bishop because the bishop had received far too many complaints that Father McDonald had far too many sermons about the evils of liquor. And in particular, not the saloons, but liquor dealers. And when you consider that some of his primary contributors of money for his parish was sitting right there in the front row, preparatory to going out to their local liquor distributors' shops there. These guys had influence. Was moved. Now the liquor dealers continued to sell. Haverhill had an interesting liquor policy. Haverhill was a dry town in many ways. And because the immigrant population was relatively low, and it had able to vote dry over and over. But when the vote started to turn more and more in favor of allowing liquor establishments, and a policy was developed to limit the number of licenses issued based upon the number of votes that were received in favor of having liquor. So if the numbers dropped, they completely take away a certain number of licenses. Okay. So that was one thing that they had to keep in mind. And by the way, if you know anything about the annexation of Bradford to Haverhill, of which many of us are still crying, 1896, one of the primary reasons, as I discovered when I did my great research on it, is that Bradford was always dry. And the assumption was if they could annex Bradford to Haverhill, they would be acquiring another 4,000 or 5,000 dry boats. And it worked for a while. Until there was just too many Irish and Italians and French said, we'd like a little bit of vino, a little bit of schnapps, something. A final thing about liquor. Haverhill also had another interesting way of raising money with liquor. It gave out licenses for what were known as, I think, kitchen saloons. Anyone, any housekeeper like you, Terry, you could buy a license to sell liquor by the glass in your kitchen. So, if you could afford to buy a bottle of liquor, invite the neighbors in, instead of offering them a drink, you sell them a drink. And then you'd have enough to go buy a few more bottles. And as long as they're exposed to the house, your 2-room cottage shanty apart, you kept on doing it. But that evidently was something that lasted well into the 20th century. I had never heard of it until I was doing my book on the Irish and Haverhill. And someone said, oh, didn't you ever hear about this? We used to have one of these down the street from us. I said, well, that's because you lived in the acre. It was always Irish folks. You lived in the acre. We didn't have things like that in Bradford. We drank in Bradford. We didn't have kitchen saloons. We gave out our drinks. Whatever. We could be very funny sometimes. Final thing. I wrote a book a couple of years ago. A huge book. It's called So Far From Home. I didn't really do the writing, because what it is a collection of some 200 letters, starting in 1885, when my grandfather came to America. And the very first letter in it, the letter his mother wrote to him upon getting the word that he had arrived safely. And it said, like, every month there's another letter from his brother, from another brother, from a brother-in-law, from his mother, from his girlfriend, whatever she might have been. She was certainly a lady friend. And she certainly says things to him in those letters that I never would have dared to say to my boyfriends. And this is the 1880s. Clearly she was hoping that Grandpa Dan would say, Dan Dunn, by the way, who's Dan Dunn? The other Dan. This is the first Dan Dunn. I don't think he behaved that way. He kept right to the end about what's it like for a girl in America? Are there good jobs for a girl in America? And she does this over and over again in letters, and I wish you so much to you. And then it gets stronger. If you were to come home this Christmas, we could announce our engagement, and then we could go out walking. You have to go out walking before you're really married, and then get married just before Lent. Wouldn't that be wonderful, Dean? Dean won't be married for another 3 or 4 years, and it's not to her. But the one that had me laughing every year. And then a couple of years ago, we did a reading of these letters right here. Right here was with a fully trained group of actors like my son, who are capable of speaking with prose, could read the letters. But and here, this fun letter she writes to my grandfather. I'm probably going to choke. Hold on. Keep in mind, this is a 21-year-old girl, somewhere about 1885, 1886. And may the dove of love never lose a feather until you and I are in one bed together. What? Aren't you Catholic, girl? The nerve of her. So the book is the letters that were sent first to my grandfather, and then these are all letters my family didn't know of, including my mother, the daughter of these people. Even better, I think, were the 150 letters that were sent to my grandmother, written from 1895 to about 1910. She is a younger, lively person. She writes beautiful letters back to her friends, and there's a lot of friends. And they are very detailed. And the letters she is receiving say so much about everyday life at a small farmhouse that you can just, you could write a movie script. And it's so much more active and so much more fun, even when people are poor. But it just is so entertaining, is the best way I can describe it. Better than that, she gets about 75 letters from one friend only. A girl who moved to Elmira, New York, where she was working as a housekeeper in one house after the other, and writes constantly about what it's like to be a domestic in rich people's houses, to the point where a number of historians have picked up on these letters and are now including them in books they're writing about what it's like to have been an Irish immigrant woman. So, I invite you to come up, take a look at the iPad product School of Living, maybe collect one of the cards, give you information about the book. Say hello to me, tell me what you love to talk, and now if there are any questions, I'm open-ended. I can talk about anything to do with Haverhill. a book on Bradford, photo history, a book on photo history of Bradford, one on Haverhill, 2 books on the Irish, 1 on the Italians, 1 on ethnic groups, and finally, when my poor college, Bradford College, where I taught for 25 years, it had Thomas Pittleary for a student. I don't know where I went wrong. Thomas Pittleary showed up wearing a red shirt to a talk on Ireland. I did, my final book was one on Bradford College. So I got a few of them here. If anyone's interested, I'm selling them all at half price. Clear off space at home. Thank you all very much. Any questions? Anyone have any questions? Please ask me questions. Let me show I can answer questions. You get done and ask a question. You're fine. There'll be a test. There will be a test. I'm not against it, but even if I can't see it, just speak up. Anybody?
The one in the back, yes.
Okay.
It's me, Pat, Jay Cleary.
Oh, Jay, how are you? I told you I should have mentioned the Clearys. That's the other Irish word you're talking about.
Yeah,
How are you, Jay?
the one who never became a judge. And is glad he didn't. Hugh Tallant of Talent. Was he the caretaker or the gardener here at the Buckwoods? And was he one of the first Irish? Was that his name?
Yeah.
I didn't hear the name.
Hugh Talent, yeah. Hugh, and Talent, Talent. Talent.
No, I'm not familiar with the name.
That might be a folklore then, but it's in the books.
More than likely.
Yeah, that's up that he was here as a caretaker and planted the buttonwoods trees.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's perfect.
Thank you for your.
You're welcome.
I've written too much. The eyes
Could be
went,
Scotch Irish.
the eyes went immediately after I finished the book, so it's been about 3 years now. So if I read it very, very large and look at it with my magnifier, I can make it out. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Any else? Oh, all right then. Come take a look at, pick up the card, come say hello to me, whatever.
Yes, because we're Irish and we have firefighters in our family. Why weren't there any Irish firefighters in Haverhill?
I don't know. It seemed to be very much, I think maybe because of the way the fire department was set up. The police department was a city operated. The fire department for a long time was like private groups, volunteers, etc. So by the 20th century, we had a firefighter, including one of my cousins, Mommy Donovan. But no explanation. I grew up hearing that. Then when I went looking at pictures, I had no trouble finding old photos of Irish police, Irish working policemen. Could not find any firemen in that 19th century period. No idea. And the same thing with the gas company and the electric company. It'd be the simplest thing is to say, oh, it's bigotry or something. Who knows? You get jobs with your friends.
Thank you.
One person gets on, brings them over.
Yeah.